I always hated the annual family spring garden party. It was less of a family gathering and more of a stage for my older sister, Chloe, to perform her favorite role. Before we continue, please subscribe and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Your support helps this powerful, life-changing story reach the world. The flawless, wealthy socialite. The event was held at her sprawling estate, a property so large it had its own private lake and a staff of 5. The grass was cut to exact millimeters, and the hedges were trimmed into sharp, unnatural boxes. I stood near the patio holding a plastic cup of lemonade, watching my 6-year-old daughter Lily play near the edge of the lawn. Lily was a free spirit. She loved bugs, dirt, and chasing butterflies. She wore a simple yellow sundress that I had bought at a discount store, and she was the happiest kid in the world. But in Chloe's world, happiness didn't matter if it didn't look expensive. Chloe emerged from the French doors, wearing a pristine custom-made white silk dress that probably cost more than my car. She held a crystal champagne flute, laughing loudly at a joke told by one of her wealthy friends. She looked like a magazine cover, completely detached from reality. I watched her scan the yard, her eyes landing on my daughter with a look of pure disgust. Chloe had always viewed me as the family disappointment. I didn't marry a hedge fund manager or a real estate tycoon. I married a high school science teacher and I worked from home. To Chloe, I was Sarah, the plain sister. She tolerated my presence at these events only so she could look better by comparison. Her husband, Richard, stood nearby, wearing a tailored linen suit and checking his phone obsessively. He was a venture capitalist, or at least that's what his business card said. They lived a life of leased luxury cars, designer handbags, and exotic vacations. Everything they touched was supposed to turn to gold. But I always felt a strange emptiness behind their perfect smiles. Today Chloe was especially frantic. She was hosting the Sapphire Gala next month, a massive charity event that would solidify her status as the queen of local high society. She had been talking about it for hours, making sure everyone knew how exclusive the guest list was. Only the elite, Sarah, she had told me earlier, sipping her mimosa. I'm sure you understand why I can't give you a ticket. You just feel so out of place. I had simply nodded, perfectly content to stay home. The afternoon sun was hot and a brief, sudden rain shower had passed through an hour earlier, leaving small puddles near the stone pathways. Lily was in her element. She had found a family of earthworms near the flower beds and was building a tiny house for them using twigs and leaves. Her hands were slightly smudged with topsoil, but she was being careful not to wipe them on her yellow dress. I smiled, taking a step forward to tell her it was almost time for cake. Just then, Chloe began her grand procession across the lawn. She was walking with her 3 best friends, women who looked like exact clones of her, right down to the bleached blonde hair and the oversized sunglasses. They were walking down the main stone path, completely ignoring the rest of the family. Chloe was holding her white silk skirt up delicately, complaining loudly about the humidity ruining her blowout. I saw Lily stand up, holding a particularly large leaf she wanted to show me. She turned around, her face beaming with pure, innocent joy. She didn't see Chloe and her entourage marching down the path like a royal parade. The timing was a slow-motion disaster. Lily started running toward me, her little sandals slapping softly against the wet grass. "Mommy! Look what I found," she called out, her voice bright and full of excitement. Her path intersected directly with the stone walkway Chloe was parading down. I opened my mouth to tell Lily to slow down, to watch her step on the slippery stones. But she was moving too fast. As Lily stepped onto the walkway, her foot caught the edge of a raised flagstone. She stumbled, her arms windmilling as she tried to catch her balance. She didn't fall, but her shoe splashed directly into a shallow puddle of muddy rainwater that had collected in a divot on the stone. A few drops of dirty water flew through the air. It wasn't a huge splash. It was a tiny, almost microscopic spray of muddy water. But one single dark droplet landed squarely on the toe of Chloe's $1,000 white designer heel. The entire garden seemed to go dead silent. The birds stopped singing. The clinking of glasses stopped. Chloe stopped dead in her tracks, staring down at her shoe as if someone had just dropped a bomb on it. Her face contorted into a mask of absolute, unhinged fury. For a second nobody moved. Lily looked up at her aunt, her big brown eyes wide with innocent surprise. "Oops," Lily said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm sorry, Aunt Chloe. Any normal person would have wiped it off and laughed. Any normal aunt would have hugged her niece and said it was okay. But Chloe was not normal. Her obsession with her image had rotted her soul from the inside out. Chloe's eyes darted from her ruined shoe to Lily's slightly dirty hands. Her breathing became heavy, her chest heaving under the white silk. "You," Chloe hissed, her voice shaking with a terrifying, venomous rage. "Look at what you did." I started running across the lawn, dropping my plastic cup. "Chloe, it was an accident," I yelled, trying to reach them before things escalated. But I was too far away. Chloe didn't hear me, or she simply didn't care. She looked at my sweet 6-year-old daughter not as a child, but as an enemy who had dared to tarnish her perfection. Chloe raised her hands, her manicured nails digging into her palms. Her friends stepped back, sensing the explosion. The mask of the elegant socialite melted away completely, leaving only a cruel, ugly monster behind. Before I could reach them, Chloe stepped forward. She didn't just yell. She didn't just scold. She raised her hands and shoved my 6-year-old daughter squarely in the chest. It wasn't a light push. It was a hard, aggressive, full-body shove fueled by pure anger. The force of the push lifted Lily off her feet. She flew backward, her tiny arms flailing in the air. Right behind Lily, just off the stone path, was a deep, muddy sinkhole where a sprinkler head had broken earlier that morning. It was filled with thick, brown, freezing sludge. Lily landed directly in the center of it with a loud, sickening splash. The muddy water exploded upward, completely soaking her yellow sundress, her hair, and her face. She hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the wind out of her. A collective gasp echoed across the manicured lawn. The wealthy guests froze in shock, their champagne glasses halfway to their mouths. I screamed my daughter's name, sprinting the last few yards and falling to my knees in the wet grass. Lily was sitting in the freezing mud, gasping for air, her eyes wide with shock and terror. The yellow dress was ruined. But that wasn't the worst part. Lily began to wail. It was a heartbroken, terrified cry that tore through my soul. She looked down at her muddy hands, shivering uncontrollably. I grabbed her, pulling her out of the sludge and wrapping my arms around her, not caring that the mud was soaking into my own clothes. I looked up at Chloe, my blood boiling with a rage so hot it blurred my vision. "What is wrong with you?" I screamed. "She's a child." Chloe didn't look remorseful. She stood tall, brushing a microscopic speck of dirt off her pristine white silk dress. She glared down at us with absolute disgust, her lip curled in a sneer. "She ruined my shoes," Chloe shouted back, her voice echoing across the silent yard. "She's a clumsy, dirty menace. Look at her playing in the dirt. She's nothing but a filthy little pig." The word hit me like a physical blow. Pig. She called my beautiful, sweet daughter a pig in front of 50 people. Lily buried her muddy face in my shoulder, sobbing hysterically. She was humiliated. She was hurt. And she didn't understand why her aunt hated her so much. I held her tight, feeling her tiny heartbeat racing against my chest. I expected the family to intervene. I expected my parents to rush over and scold Chloe for putting her hands on a child. Instead, my mother hurried over with a napkin, dabbing frantically at Chloe's shoe. "Oh, Chloe, sweetheart, don't worry, we can get this dry cleaned," my mother cooed, completely ignoring her weeping granddaughter. My father stood awkwardly in the background, staring at his shoes. "Sarah," my mother said, finally looking at me, "you really should keep a better eye on her. You know how Chloe is about her designer clothes. It's an important day for her." I stared at my mother, sick to my stomach. They were enabling her. They were protecting the wealthy daughter and throwing the plain one to the wolves. They valued a piece of leather over a child's safety. "We're leaving," I said, my voice dead and cold. I picked Lily up in my arms. She was heavy and covered in thick mud, but I didn't care. I walked past Chloe, stopping just inches from her face. "You will regret this," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the garden music. Chloe just rolled her eyes and turned back to her friends. I walked out without another word. The drive home was agonizing. Lily cried softly in the back seat, wrapped in a towel I kept in the trunk. "Mommy, why did Aunt Chloe push me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Am I a pig?" "No, baby," I said, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. "You are beautiful and perfect. Aunt Chloe is just a very sick, sad person." I spent the evening giving Lily a warm bubble bath, washing the mud out of her hair, and reading her favorite stories until she finally fell asleep. Once her door was closed, I went into my home office. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. My family thought I was just a low-level data entry clerk who worked from home. They thought my husband and I barely scraped by. They had no idea that 10 years ago, I developed a data mining algorithm that I sold to a major tech firm. They had no idea that I managed a massive, highly successful private equity portfolio under a blind trust. I wasn't the plain sister. I was the silent billionaire. And tonight I was going to use every single resource I had to completely dismantle Chloe's entire life. I started by looking into Richard's venture capital firm. If Chloe was throwing parties and buying $10,000 dresses, the money had to be coming from somewhere. I logged into my secure terminal, bypassing standard public records and diving deep into corporate filings, lien registries and offshore accounts. It didn't take long to find the cracks in their perfect facade. Richard's firm hadn't had a successful exit in 4 years. They were burning through investor cash at an alarming rate. But the personal debt was even worse. Chloe and Richard had leveraged everything. Their mansion was mortgaged to the hilt, and a quiet notice of default had been filed by the bank 2 weeks ago. They were secretly 90 days behind on their payments. Her designer cars were leased and the payments were bouncing. They were drowning in a sea of red ink. But how was she paying for the extravagant Sapphire Gala next month? The venue alone cost $200,000. I dug deeper into the charity's financial structure. The Sapphire Foundation was registered as a nonprofit, but Chloe was the sole financial director. I pulled the bank routing numbers and tracked the incoming ticket sales. The truth made me smile, a cold, hard smile. Chloe wasn't hosting a charity gala. She was running a massive fraud. The ticket sales for the Sapphire Gala, tickets that cost $5,000 a plate, were supposed to go toward building a children's hospital wing. Instead, Chloe was routing the money through a shell company in the Cayman Islands and using it to pay off her personal loan sharks and back taxes. She was embezzling millions from her own wealthy friends to keep her fake life afloat. If the gala went off without a hitch, she would collect the money, pay her debts, and the charity would quietly declare bankruptcy next year. It was a desperate, illegal Ponzi scheme. She was playing in the mud indeed. I leaned back in my chair. Revealing her fraud to the police would send her to jail, but it wouldn't give me the satisfaction of seeing her face when her world collapsed. I wanted her to feel exactly how Lily felt, humiliated, helpless, and stripped of her dignity in front of an audience. I looked at the venue for the gala. The Grand Horizon Hotel, the most exclusive ballroom in the city. I picked up my phone and called my primary broker in New York. "Hello, Sarah." My broker, David, answered on the first ring. "What can I do for you at this hour?" "David," I said, "I need you to look into the holding group that owns the Grand Horizon Hotel. I want to buy it." There was a brief pause. "The entire hotel, Sarah? That's a $300 million acquisition." "I have the liquidity," I said smoothly. "Offer them a 20% premium for an expedited, quiet cash close. I want the deed in my trust's name within 10 days. "Consider it done," David said. "Anything else?" "Yes," I added. "Find every outstanding promissory note and personal loan attached to Richard and Chloe Vance. Buy their debt. Pay whatever premium the loan sharks want. I want to be their sole creditor." "Aggressive," David chuckled. "I love it. I'll have the paperwork ready by morning." I hung up the phone. Chloe had called my daughter a pig. She had pushed her into the dirt because she thought she was untouchable. She thought her wealth was a shield. She didn't realize she was building a house of cards on top of a volcano. And I held the detonator. The next 2 weeks were going to be very interesting. The acquisition moved faster than expected. Money talks and massive amounts of cash scream. Within 8 days, my holding company was the legal owner of the Grand Horizon Hotel. 2 days after that, David secured Richard's personal debts. I now literally owned the roof over Chloe's head, the venue for her gala, and the very air she breathed financially. Meanwhile, Chloe was parading around town, posting photos on social media about her dress fittings and the exclusive menu for the Sapphire Gala. She was completely oblivious to the traps snapping shut around her. 2 weeks after the garden party incident, my phone rang. It was Chloe. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Hello," I said. "Sarah," Chloe's voice dripped with fake sympathy. "I'm just calling to finalize the guest list for the gala next week. Mom said you might still want to come. But honestly, given what happened at the garden party, I think it's best if you sit this one out. Oh, I asked, keeping my tone perfectly neutral. Why is that? Well, it's a very high-end event, Chloe sighed. And you know, accidents happen. It's really not an environment for clumsy people. Or pigs. The audacity was almost impressive. She was doubling down on the insult. I understand, I said calmly. You only want a certain caliber of people there. Exactly, Chloe said, sounding relieved that I wasn't putting up a fight. I knew you'd get it. Tell Lily I said hi. She hung up. I put the phone down and laughed aloud. The sheer arrogance was blinding her. She was locking the doors to her own execution. The week leading up to the gala was a blur of strategic planning. I met with the general manager of the Grand Horizon Hotel, a sharp man named Mr. Sterling. I revealed myself as the new owner and outlined exactly how the night was going to go. I gave him specific instructions regarding the catering, the security, and the audiovisual equipment in the main ballroom. Mr. Sterling, who had dealt with Chloe's demanding, abusive behavior for months during the event planning, was more than happy to comply. On the day of the gala, I didn't stay home. Instead, I took Lily to the most expensive salon in the city. We spent the afternoon getting our hair and nails done. We were going to a party after all. I had a custom dress made for the occasion. It wasn't white silk. It was a deep, rich sapphire blue, a nod to the charity she was robbing. I bought Lily a matching blue dress, adorned with tiny, elegant sparkles. When we looked in the mirror, we looked like royalty. Mommy, where are we going? Lily asked, twirling in her new dress. We are going to Aunt Chloe's party, sweetie, I said, adjusting a diamond necklace around my throat. But she said we couldn't come, Lily frowned, the memory of the puddle still haunting her eyes. Aunt Chloe doesn't make the rules tonight, I promised her, kissing her forehead. Tonight, Mommy makes the rules. At 8 p.m., my private driver pulled our black SUV up to the valet stand of the Grand Horizon Hotel. The entrance was swarming with local celebrities, politicians, and wealthy socialites, all dressed to the nines. Flashbulbs went off as people walked the red carpet. Chloe had spared no expense, with stolen money of course. I took Lily's hand and we walked up the steps. 2 massive security guards stood at the entrance, holding iPads with the guest list. As I approached, one of them held up his hand. Name, please? The guard asked, looking at my blue dress with a hint of suspicion. Sarah Miller, I said. He scrolled through the iPad. He shook his head. I'm sorry, ma'am. You aren't on the list. This is a private event. Check again, I said softly. Before the guard could argue, the massive glass doors flew open. Mr. Sterling, the hotel general manager, rushed out, his face pale with urgency. He pushed past the security guards. Stand down. Mr. Sterling snapped at the guards. He turned to me and bowed deeply right there on the red carpet. Miss Miller. I'm so sorry for the delay. Everything is prepared exactly as you requested. Please come right this way. The guards stared in shock. The other guests whispering in the line went silent. I smiled at Mr. Sterling. Thank you. Let's go, Lily. We walked past the velvet ropes and into the grand lobby. The ballroom doors were open, revealing a breathtaking setup of crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, and hundreds of wealthy guests drinking champagne. And there, standing on the main stage in a sparkling $10,000 silver gown, was Chloe. She was holding a microphone, getting ready to give her welcome speech. I walked slowly down the center aisle of the ballroom, holding Lily's hand. The click of my heels echoed under the high ceiling. Heads began to turn. People noticed the stunning sapphire dress, the diamonds, and the sheer confidence radiating from me. Then Chloe saw me. She stopped mid-sentence. Her smile froze and her eyes widened in pure, unfiltered shock. She lowered the microphone. Sarah, she mouthed, unable to comprehend what she was seeing. The plain sister was suddenly the best-dressed woman in the room. Chloe recovered quickly, her shock turning to fury. She snapped her fingers at the head of security near the stage. She pointed directly at me. Security! Chloe yelled into the microphone, her voice shrill and echoing through the massive room. Remove that woman immediately. She is not on the guest list. She is trespassing. The crowd gasped. Murmurs ripped through the room. My parents, who were sitting at a VIP table near the front, looked horrified. My mother stood up, putting her hands to her face. Two large security guards started walking toward me. I didn't run. I didn't flinch. I just stopped walking, standing dead center in the room, and looked up at the stage. The guards reached me, reaching out to grab my arms. "Ma'am, you need to come with us," one of them said gruffly. "Touch her and you are fired immediately," a loud voice boomed from the back of the room. It was Mr. Sterling. He power walked down the aisle holding a sleek black folder. The guards froze, looking at the hotel manager in confusion. Mr. Sterling stepped between me and the guards. He looked up at Chloe on the stage. "Mrs. Vance," Mr. Sterling said, projecting his voice so the front rows could hear. "You do not have the authority to remove this guest." Chloe's face turned scarlet. "I rented this ballroom. I am the host. Throw her out." "You rented the ballroom," Mr. Sterling corrected gently. "But she owns the building." The silence that fell over the room was absolute. It was so quiet you could hear the ice melting in the glasses. Chloe's jaw dropped. "What?" she whispered. Mr. Sterling turned to the crowd. He took a microphone from a nearby stand. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce the new owner of the Grand Horizon Hotel Holding Group, and the primary benefactor of tonight's event, Miss Sarah Miller." The gasp from the crowd was deafening. My parents looked like they were going to faint. Richard, sitting near the stage, turned the color of ash. Chloe gripped the podium, her knuckles turning white. "This is a lie," Chloe screamed, her voice cracking. "She's a data clerk. She's poor." I let go of Lily's hand and told her to stay with Mr. Sterling. I walked up the short flight of stairs to the stage. I walked right up to Chloe. She tried to step back, but the podium trapped her. I reached out and gently took the microphone from her trembling hand. "Hello everyone," I said, my voice calm, steady, and echoing perfectly through the state-of-the-art sound system. "Thank you for coming to the Sapphire Gala. It's so wonderful to see so much money gathered in one room for a good cause. Or rather, what you thought was a good cause." Chloe lunged at me. "Shut up. Turn off her mic," she screamed at the sound booth. The audio technician who was on my payroll ignored her. I pressed a button on a small remote in my hand. The massive digital screens behind the stage, which had been displaying the charity's logo, flickered and changed. The screens lit up with a massive spreadsheet. It was bank statements, routing numbers, wire transfers. "What you see behind me," I said calmly, "is the financial reality of the Sapphire Foundation. Over the past 3 months, ticket sales and donations totaling $2.4 million have not gone to a children's hospital. They have been routed to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. An account owned exclusively by Chloe and Richard Vance." The crowd erupted. Shouts of anger and disbelief filled the air. Donors stood up from their tables, pointing at the screens. "No!" Chloe shrieked, waving her hands frantically. "It's photoshopped. She's crazy." I clicked the remote again. The screen changed to show the notice of default on Chloe's mansion. "This is why," I explained over the growing roar of the crowd. "The Vance family is completely bankrupt. Their home is in foreclosure. Their cars are repossessed. They are millions of dollars in personal debt. They threw this party to steal your money and save their own fake lifestyle." Richard stood up from his table, panicking. He didn't run to his wife. He turned and sprinted toward the side exit, trying to escape the room. But I had prepared for that too. As Richard hit the exit doors, 2 uniformed police officers stepped inside, blocking his path. They grabbed him by the arms. The sirens outside the hotel suddenly became audible, flashing red and blue lights through the ballroom windows. The fraud division had been waiting for my signal. The room was in total chaos. High society women were screaming. Men were demanding their money back. I stood on the stage watching the destruction of Chloe's empire. Chloe collapsed to her knees on the stage. The $10,000 silver dress pooled around her. Her perfect blowout was ruined. Her mascara was running down her face in thick black streaks. She looked up at me, sobbing hysterically. "Why?" she choked out, her chest heaving. "Why are you doing this to me?" I looked down at her. I didn't feel pity. I felt justice. I crouched down so I was eye level with her. "Do you remember the garden party, Chloe?" I asked softly so only she could hear. "Do you remember what you called my daughter?" Chloe shook her head frantically, tears flying from her face. "It was just a dress," she cried. It was an accident. It wasn't about the dress, I whispered. You pushed a 6-year-old child into a mud puddle, I continued, my voice cold as ice. You humiliated her. You called her a filthy little pig. You thought you could treat us like dirt because you thought your money made you a god. I stood back up, looking down at her pathetic, broken form. But you were the one playing in the mud, Chloe. You were the one wallowing in filth and lies. I just decided to show everyone what you really look like. The police officers marched up onto the stage. They grabbed Chloe by the arms, hauling her to her feet. They pulled her hands behind her back and clamped cold steel handcuffs over her wrists. Chloe Vance, you are under arrest for grand larceny and wire fraud, the officer said loudly. Chloe screamed, thrashing against the officers. Mom, help me. Mom, she shrieked to our mother in the front row. But my mother just stood there, her hands covering her mouth, stepping back away from the stage. The high society crowd she had worshipped her entire life was now looking at her with absolute disgust. She was a pariah. She was nothing. They dragged Chloe and Richard out of the ballroom in handcuffs, right past the flashing cameras of the local press who had miraculously been tipped off about the arrest. The photos of the glamorous socialite crying in handcuffs would be on the front page of every paper by morning. I took a deep breath and lifted the microphone one last time. The crowd quieted down, looking at me for answers. Ladies and gentlemen, I said. As the new owner of this hotel and the person who uncovered this fraud, I have frozen the offshore accounts. Every single penny of your donations will be refunded to you by tomorrow morning. A wave of relieved applause washed over the room. However, I continued, I urge you to take those refunded tickets and donate them directly to the Real Children's Hospital downtown. Let's not let one bad apple ruin a night meant for giving. The applause turned into a standing ovation. People were cheering. I smiled, turning off the microphone and handing it to the sound tech. I walked down the stairs of the stage and back into the crowd. The velvet sea parted for me. I walked straight to my daughter. Lily was standing with Mr. Sterling, holding a small plate of chocolate strawberries. She looked up at me with wide, awestruck eyes. Mommy, you were amazing, she said, her face glowing. Are we going home now? Not yet, sweetie, I said, taking her hand. We have a party to enjoy. We spent the rest of the night eating the finest food, dancing under the crystal chandeliers and talking with the guests. Nobody looked at us with pity or disdain. They looked at us with profound respect. My parents tried to approach me later in the evening, their faces a mix of shock and desperate apology. Sarah, we had no idea, my father stammered. We didn't know she was. I know, I interrupted gently but firmly. But you knew she pushed Lily. And you chose the dress over your granddaughter. We'll talk about this eventually. But not tonight. I walked away, leaving them standing alone in the crowd. They had chosen their golden child, and now their golden child was sitting in a holding cell. The consequences of their enabling had finally caught up to them. I felt a massive weight lift off my shoulders. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Chloe and Richard were convicted of fraud. They lost the mansion, the cars, and every ounce of their social standing. Chloe was sentenced to 5 years in a minimum security prison. I heard through the grapevine that she was assigned to the laundry detail, washing other people's dirty clothes. It was poetic justice. I didn't visit her. I didn't need to. I took the money I had made from the hotel acquisition and set up a real, fully funded foundation for children's hospitals in Lily's name. We bought a beautiful new house with a massive garden, far away from the toxic upper-class drama. On a warm Saturday afternoon, I was sitting on the patio reading a book. Lily was playing in the yard. It had rained the night before and a large puddle had formed near the edge of the grass. Lily ran toward it, wearing her favorite boots. She stopped at the edge, looked at me and smiled. She jumped right into the middle of the puddle, splashing water everywhere, laughing with pure, unbridled joy. I laughed too. Let her get dirty. Let her be a kid. After all, mud washes off. But a rotten soul never does.